Over the past month, I've had one passage of Scripture all over me. Can't get away from it. I wake up in the morning and it's in my head. I go to bed at night, it's in my head. All through the day, it's literally just in my heart, in my head, swirling around. It's only 2 verses, but the gravity of these verses is just wrecking me. And these 2 verses come from the 24th chapter of Joshua. It reads like this: "Now, therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth, and do away with the gods which your fathers served beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the Euphrates River, or the gods of the Amorites in whose lands you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now, if you've been in Christian circles for any amount of time, you've probably heard that line. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It was actually at the table yesterday, went to a vow renewal for this lovely couple here, Matt and Heather. They recommitted their lives to Jesus on their 22nd wedding anniversary, because this time they wanted to do it as a covenant under God in the presence of other people who loved God. And that was at their table. It's something that you see, because it's the quotable line, it's the memorable one. It shows up at weddings and on T-shirts and coffee mugs and cute little journals. But it's the stuff that's kind of around that memorable line that is given little attention. And it's that stuff that's surrounding that one line that's really been messing with me for the better part of 5 or 6 weeks. So when Joshua said those words, the memorable line, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." It's part of actually his farewell speech. Joshua's old here. This is his last big speeches to the people and the leaders of Israel before he goes the ways of his fathers, as he says it. And in this farewell speech, he has the attention in the first part in chapter 23, where we're going to look first. The leaders and the heads of the tribes and the clans are gathered together, and they've done much of what God has commanded them to do and expected of them up to this point. They have believed God's promises to go into the promised land. See, Joshua took over from Moses. As Moses could see the promised land from far off, Joshua now takes over, is leading the people of Israel into the promised land. And they've been listening. They've been doing what God has said for the most part. They've come into Canaan. They've been strong and courageous. And here at the end of Joshua's life, on the whole, you could say that they have possessed the land. You could say that on the whole, here as Joshua sits about to go to his death, they have done a good job of conquering and doing what God said. But there does still remain a few of these pockets of resistance, if you will, if I can use some military language. There were some people and places that haven't been conquered, some people that haven't been dealt with yet fully as God had instructed them to do. But Joshua says in chapter 23, verse 4, "See, I have apportioned to you these nations which remain as an inheritance for your tribes, with all the nations which I have eliminated." In other words, Joshua goes about allotting lands for these tribes of Israel, not only based on who they have already conquered, but also upon those who have yet to be conquered. Do you see that? He says, "I've allotted lands to you." So he says, look, these guys aren't completely conquered yet, but this is part of your inheritance. I'm basing your inheritance not only on what you currently possess, but also upon which God says you're going to possess. Because Joshua understands that God is a man of his word. God is faithful to his word. Turn to somebody and say, God is faithful. He's faithful to everything he says. The way Joshua is operating is he's moving and acting because he knows and relies upon the faithfulness of God and his word being what he says he is and doing what he says he's going to do. He knows in confidence he can make these declarations. This will be your land. This will be yours. Even though you don't have it all yet, this is where you're going to raise your families. This is where you're going to put roots. This is where you're going to put down lives, because even though it's not yet doesn't mean that it's not. Just because you don't yet have it doesn't mean you won't yet have it, because God promised it. And when God promises it, you can rely on it. Joshua knows that. It's how he operates. He continues in verse 5, and the Lord your God, he will thrust them away from you. So who's doing it here? God. But they have an active part in it, right? He says, God will thrust them away from you and drive them away from you, and you will take possession of their land just as the Lord your God promised you. Verse 6, be very determined then to keep and do everything that is written in the book of the law of Moses, so that you will not turn aside from it to the right or to the left, so that you will not associate with these nations, these which remain with you. In other words, those that are still there, those pockets of people that you haven't driven out completely yet, that you won't even associate with them, or mention the names of their gods, or make anyone swear by them, or serve them, or bow down to them, but you are to cling to the Lord your God, as you have done to this day. So Joshua is very clear that it is of utmost importance that these people follow God's commands, that they stay true to the God of Jacob, the God of Israel, the only true God. He says, I need you to be sure of this. You've got to follow the law of Moses, the law that God gave through Moses. He says, even more specifically, do not engage with these other gods. He tells Israel, don't even associate with them. These people that still remain there, don't even go and mingle with them. Why? Because when we associate with people who have different viewpoints, different beliefs about faith, different ways of operating in their faith life, our tendency is to take on what they believe. Our tendency when we associate with people of different worldviews from us, different ways they live their life as playing out of faith, our tendency is to intermingle our beliefs with theirs. See, here's Israel, a people, don't forget, specifically chosen by God. Out of all the people on earth, God looks at Israel and chooses them. Chooses them. A people set apart to be his people. And they know that they're supposed to worship him and serve him. Actually, they know they're supposed to worship and serve him only, not just as one amongst many. In the law of Moses, it was very clear, serve no other gods, have no other gods before me, do not worship idols. It's very plain and clear. So here they are, though, and yet idol worship seems to be this obsession they have, this stumbling block for generations. It's something that just keeps popping up through their family lineage. Anybody know what it's like to have a stumbling block through your family? It's something that just keeps popping up generation after generation. Yeah, for the Israelites, yeah, some of y'all are laughing and some of y'all are laughing like sad laughing, like, yeah. Well, for the Israelites, it's worship of false gods. They have this seeming affinity, lean towards going back to these false gods that they know aren't God. But yet they keep going back to these idols. I mean, if you're anything like me, you think, why? Like, why would the chosen people of God that aren't too far removed from the wonders he worked in Egypt, many of them one generation off, they've heard the stories. They've seen God move themselves. They just came out of a wilderness not too long ago. I mean, these are the people who are chosen by God. Here's God comes into Egypt, y'all. He literally, through Moses and Aaron, performs all these signs and wonders. These plagues happen, but yet the Israelites are safe. He brings them out of the people who oppress them, the people who make them slaves. They come out of there not only with their lives, but with the wealth of Egypt in tow. They come out with all the wealth of the land. They go through a stinking body of water that parts for them. They walk through it. They go to the other side, and now the waves crash in on everybody who's pursuing them. They go into a desert where they're safe now. Moses goes up on a mountain. While they're at the bottom of the mountain, they make an idol. This is the people we're talking about. That far removed. Moses is out of sight, meeting with the God who saved them, and the people of Israel fashion a God with their own hands and worship it. Why? Why would these people be so given to worshiping an idol? I've wondered. And I don't know if these are the only reasons or the specific reasons, but I want to give you 5. 5 reasons that maybe a people chosen by God would be given to worshiping idols. Number 1, idols can be seen. Number 2, idols could be carried with you. Number 3, at that time it was thought that many of these surrounding pagan gods controlled things like the weather and the production of crops. Number 4, many of these gods are thought to control fertility. So how many babies you would have. And number 5, it was the norm. The cultural norm was idol worship. 5 reasons. So if you're like me, maybe you never wonder about these things, but if it's ever crossed your mind, how could a people chosen by God so often go back again and worship the gods that they know are not God, act as if they're real, and worship them, give them their devotion? How could they do this? Here's at least 5 possible reasons. That's at least 5 reasons. Now, I want to go back through these. If you can pull that last slide back up, just so they're in front of us. Number 1, let's go back to the first one, though. Let's go backwards. Idols can be seen. Idols can be seen. So when you fashion something with your hands, whether it's out of wood or you make a mold, an image out of some kind of metal, it gives you something to literally have in front of you. It gives you an image to focus on as you're engaged in worship. You know, kind of like the Hindus, kind of like Buddhists. It gives you something as you're going through whatever forms of worship you're performing to literally fix your gaze upon and imagine that as this is the thing that gets my affection. It gives you something to see. But the God of the Hebrews, as we know, is unseen. Can't see God. As the Bible tells us, God is spirit. Reason number 2, you can feel it. You can take it with you. Because when you can take something with you, not only can you see it, but you can feel it. And now I don't have to wonder, is my God with me? Because, of course he is. He's right here. I'm carrying him with me. I don't have to wonder if the presence of God is around me, if he sees me, or if he's present, because, I'm just toting him around with me. It's really nice to know that my God is just right here because I'm just packing him around. But since you can carry him with you, you can also control him. Because you can put your gods up on full display when it's convenient. But then when you don't want anybody to know that you got your God with you, you can just stow them away, hide them in the closet. Nobody knows you've got a God with you. You can confine them. You can control them however you like. Reason number 3, people would think at that time that many of these surrounding gods would control things like how much sun comes down, how much rain comes down, how the crops come up. Now, this is a central concern, not just for Israel, but for everybody in this time, because they want some food to eat, right? If you don't have the sunshine like it should, if you don't have the rainfall like it should, your crops are minimal and you want enough, you want to have provision for your family, right? And even if the sun shines like it really should, then the crops really come up. And then you have abundance. And then you can grow in wealth, you can get comfortable, you can put down more roots because you're not worried about just the means of production of having your stuff anymore. Now you can start to expand your civilization, your power grows, and you know how this goes. It just keeps going and going and going. So if I'm one who follows God, even amongst people who also say they believe in Yahweh, maybe it wouldn't be wise to offend those other gods of those other people. I mean, no, I believe in God. I worship Yahweh, of course. But, we need to be kind because, those people will be respectful. We don't want to make fun of their gods. We don't want to offend them. And by the way, just in case there's actually something to this, we don't want to really offend them. Because what if they're right? Which is kind of like number 4. They thought that God was a God of fertility. Many of these pagan gods would control whether you had children or not, which again, huge concern. In this day and age, you wanted to grow in power, you wanted to grow in the community, you needed kids. That's how you gained wealth, how you gained notoriety, a good standing in the community. And if you were maybe following God, praying to Him, wanting kids, but maybe it wasn't going as quick as you wanted. Maybe it wasn't happening like you thought it should. And you could be like, well, it wouldn't hurt to try what they're saying because, it's not working for us this way. Maybe God's not listening. Maybe there is something to what they're saying about this. And, we could try what they do too. Wouldn't hurt, would it, to mix and mingle a little bit of what they're saying? So Israel's God couldn't be seen. He couldn't be controlled because how many of you know God went where He wanted to when they're in the desert and the people followed? It wasn't the other way around. It wasn't that you went and took your God with you. It was God led and the people were expected to set up camp where God went. It's a lot easier to carry Him with you though. Those first 4, pretty solid. But I also want you to see number 5. Because idol worship was the normal thing. The normal thing. All around Israel were pagan peoples with their own gods, and worship was just as much a part of their environment as it was for the people of Israel. It was normal, it was custom, it was expected. Worship of gods was going to happen. So I suggest, could it be that it was possibly just easier for Israel to show up and, not disrupt the apple cart? Was it just easier to live and let live? Let them do what they do, we do what we do. It'd be a lot easier if we just didn't get involved. In fact, these 5 reasons sound at least a little familiar to you. It's because people haven't changed that much. See, number 1, if you can pull up that next one, Corey, it appeals to our understanding. See, idols can be seen. We want to see things. We want to have it in the here and in the now. We want to look at it and know that it's real. Because how many of you know sometimes it's hard to walk by faith and not by sight? How many of you know that it's hard to embrace mystery when you don't understand what's going on around you? Number 2 appeals to our want for control. Oh, it's easy to put God on a shelf when I want Him to be there. Hide Him when it's embarrassing or I don't want anybody to know. I want God in my life on my terms, how I want Him, when I want Him, where I want Him, but that's how I want Him. That's all I want to do with it. Number 3 appeals to our desire for stuff. I just want stuff. Materialism, things. Just give me more stuff. Number 4 appeals to our want for power. I just want more. I want notoriety. I want people to notice me. I want to have influence. And it also appeals to our want for pleasure. You say, pleasure? What do you mean? Well, when the fertility gods would be worshipped, it often involved ritual prostitution. That's part of how you did it. If you're going to worship the God who supposedly gave you babies, what was often involved was going to a shrine prostitute and doing what you do with a shrine prostitute. And here this lust of the flesh is in play, because not only is it a power play, I want my family bigger, I want my name in the community to grow, I want influence. It's also a play on the flesh. I mean, you could show up, hey, baby, I'm so sorry. Man, I know we're trying to have babies, and you know I don't want to go, girl. I love you. You're my only. But I got to go do what I got to do. I want us to have babies. And if I come out here and serve these fertility gods, you know, they say that this works. And I don't want to go do it. I don't want to go at all. But I'm going to go for you. So I'll see you in a little while. It appeals to our flesh. You could say all day, I'm doing it for the gods. You could say I'm doing it for my family. But all you're doing is serving your flesh, and it gives you a good excuse to show up and do it. Reason number 5, and it may be the most powerful one, because reason number 5 appeals to our desire for acceptance. Our desire to be accepted by other people. See, remember, the one this goes with is it's the cultural norm. It is normal and expected that people are going to worship idols. That's what you do. It's your way of life. It's how you think. It's how you operate. So when you buck that expectation, not only are you bucking culture, but you're bucking the opinion of other people of you. Well, why aren't you doing this with us? What do you mean you don't think it's right? Everybody's doing it. Fall in line. Oh, you think you're so much better than us that you have a different opinion and way of looking at this than us? Like, no, you need to get in line with us. Do you think you're better than me? See, our need, deep need to be accepted by other people is so real. So real. It's how we're wired. It's part of how God made us. Each and every single one of us want to be accepted by other people. We want to be seen and loved and welcomed into the fold. But that desire also leads us to do things that we know we should not do. We know it. But yet, if it conflicts with that desire to be let in, to be accepted, so often we choose the acceptance over following what we know is the right thing to do. And if that was it on number 5, I think that's the most powerful one. It's a draw. If it was just this acceptance. But number 5 also speaks to our desire to just have things the easy way. If there's one thing I can tell you about our culture right now is that people want things the easy way. I want everything delivered to my door. I want to order everything from my phone. No, I don't want to eat right. Just give me the diet pills. That was a lot easier. No, I'm not going to fight for a relationship. That takes effort. I'll just ghost them. Maybe I'll find somebody later. If it's easy, give it to me. If it's difficult, if it takes work, I'm not interested. This is our culture. I can just hear the conversations back when these people of Israel were going through the same things. Somebody walks up, sees all the idol worship going on, and somebody's like, we can't be part of this. Somebody else is like, well, we know the right way. It's really not going to hurt that much if we just hang out with them. You know, what's that going to do? Can we really not be around them? Wouldn't it just be easier to be kind? I mean, bro, be kind. Just be respectful. Because how loving is it to shut this down? Wouldn't it just be easier to kind of go along? You know, go along to get along. But the Lord called them to something different. The Lord's called us to something different. Verse 12, For if you ever go back and cling to the rest of these nations, these which remain with you, and intermarry with them, so that you associate with them and they with you, know with certainty that the Lord your God will not continue to drive these nations out from before you. This is not a kind suggestion. This is a command. And there is a difference. This echoes a command given by Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 7, I believe verse 3, if you want to look it up later, where literally through Moses from God, he says, do not intermarry with them. Don't do it. It's echoed here. And since it's a command, it has consequences if it's not followed. The Lord your God will not continue to drive these nations out from before you, but they will be a snare and a trap to you, and a whip on your sides and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from this good land which the Lord your God has given you. Dropping down to verse 16. When you violate the covenant of the Lord your God, which he has commanded you, and you go and serve other gods and bow down to them, then the anger of the Lord will burn against you, and you will perish quickly from the good land which he has given you. So not only will you perish from the land that God's given you and all the good things he's leading you into, but as you're perishing, all these people are going to be thorns in your side, whips on you, thistles. This is a pretty terrible picture. But breaking a command has consequences. Breaking a command from God has consequences. I can't believe that I feel like a weirdo in this world saying that. But I do. Why do I feel weird, even in the own church that I'm the pastor of, that somebody's going to feel like this is a hard, mean thing to say? Breaking a command from God has consequences. I thought this was understood. Breaking a command from God has consequences. Maybe if I say it smiling, you'll like me more. But it's true. Whether it's in this life or the next, there's a reckoning. There's consequences. So Joshua says all these things. He said all these things to the leaders, chapter 23. Now he gathers the whole of Israel. All of Israel assembles, chapter 24. He goes back again through God's faithfulness, how he's been good to his promises, how blessed these people are, and how they're chosen. And then it's in verse 14 that finally he gets to these two verses that have just been in me. He says, now therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth. Let's pause there, because fearing the Lord, that's one of these phrases that gets so misunderstood. So let's just set the record straight today. What is fearing the Lord? Fearing the Lord means to reverence him, means to honor him. It's reverencing God, honoring him as God. He is God. Not just some person. Not your teacher in second grade. Not even your parents. Listen to your parents. Honor them. That's in the Bible. But we're talking about somebody with more authority. We're talking about the creator of heaven and earth. The Alpha, the Omega, the King and Kings, the Lord of Lords. This is the one for whom, from whom, by whom, and to whom everything is. This is God. So reverencing God as God, fearing God, is to treat him as God. That's what fearing the Lord means. We don't fear God and really reverence him when we try to push him to the peripheries of our lives by only giving him what I want to give you. That's not honoring him as God. Fearing the Lord is not coming in for 90 minutes on whatever Sunday feels good and saying, yeah, I really follow the Lord. That is not fearing God. Fearing God is honoring him as Lord of Lords, King of Kings, the master of my life. Understanding that he gave me breath and he takes it away. That's God. That's what fearing looks like. Serving just implies that there's feet to our faith. There's many meanings of the word serve. But serving definitely implies there's something that's going on to show that you are actually fearing him. Does that make sense? You can't serve him and then not be obedient. We're obedient to God because we fear him. Fear him only. Serve him only. Serving looks like an action. Obedience to show that you are actually fearing God, that you are in relationship and you honor him as Lord because he's the boss now, not you. If he's Lord of your life, if you fear him as God, you don't run your life anymore. And that, my friend, is the breaking point for most nominal Christians. I don't fear him. I don't honor him. It's my life. You need to wake up. It's not. And I know that sounds terrible, but it's the best news you could receive. Because you don't have to worry about providing for you anymore. You don't have to worry about your own salvation anymore. You don't have to worry about finding a purpose anymore. He gives it to you. Because he's God. He's the one to be feared and served, and we do it in sincerity and truth. Joshua continues, and do away with the gods which your fathers served beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Now, there would have been many gods that his ancestors worshipped. I mean, if you went to Mesopotamia, you went to Egypt, take your pick. There's many. They're everywhere. But I think it's really cool. This is just when I get into the word, and I love it, y'all. Like, it's really cool to me that before Abraham would have been called, for example, Abraham, the father of faith, right? Well, his father, Terah, would have been beyond the river. One of these people, their ancestors. You wonder why things repeat sometimes. Your ancestors are worshiping all these other gods. Before Abraham's called, Terah would have been worshiping other gods. Many of them probably, but at least one to his region was this moon god that some people called Sin. S-I-N, Sin, name of that god. So literally, the people are called right here to put down their god, Sin. Do away with sin, put down your gods, quit following and serving these things that end up destroying your life, and serve the Lord. Verse 15, but if it's disagreeable in your sight, he's giving them an out. Hey, you don't want to do it. If it's disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve. Whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the Euphrates River, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It's time for a decision to be made. You can serve your forefathers' gods. You can serve your neighbor's gods. Or you can serve the only true and living God. The choice is yours. You can decide, but a decision's got to be made. This is a moment of decision. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but you can't be neutral on God. You can't. There's only two stances here. Do you love him, serve him, worship him, adore him only? Or do you not? There's no neutrality on your stance with God. You can't be neutral. Jesus himself said it. He said, the one who is not with me is against me. You hear that? Two sides. The one who does not gather with me scatters. Two stances. With Jesus or against him. You believe he's the Christ or you don't. You serve him with all of your life or you don't. There's no middle ground. Joshua is laying a line in the sand here. Will you serve the God of Israel or will you not? Oh, there's many different options on the not. But really, it's only two options. You're serving God, you love him, you worship him only, or you don't. Two options. This is how the people respond. Verse 16, far be it from us that we would abandon the Lord to serve other gods. For the Lord our God is he who brought us and our fathers up out of the land of Egypt from the house of slaves and did these great signs in our sight and watched over us through all the way in which we went. among all the peoples through whose midst we passed. The Lord drove out from before us all the peoples, even the Amorites who lived in the land. We also will serve the Lord, for he is our God. All right. They make the right decision. They answer the right way. This is all you can ask for, right? Look what Joshua says next. You will not be able to serve the Lord. What? He says that. You will not be able to serve him. You're not going to be able to do it. For he is a holy God. What is happening right now? He's a jealous God. He will not forgive your wrongdoing or your sins. If you abandon the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and destroy you after he's done good to you. What is this response from Joshua? I mean, he puts a line in the sand. He says, make a decision. They make the right one, and he comes back with this. What is going on here? I mean, will God truly not forgive their sins? Will God truly strike them down for being disobedient? Here's what I think is happening here. I think Joshua is reminding them of their own inability to be faithful and of God's continued faithfulness. So in the first place, he reminds them, hey, you got a history of not being faithful. It's kind of in our blood. It's something that just keeps popping up, it seems. See, the Israelites kept being unfaithful to the Lord, infidelity, over and over and over. I mean, we could spend a lot of time and just see how the cycles happen. But you can take my word for it. Serve the Lord, false gods. Serve the Lord, forget him, false gods. They bring in this idol worship all the time. Even right now in this moment when he's giving the speech, some of them apparently had gods because he has to say, do away with them. So even in this moment, when they've seen God's faithfulness, he has to make a declaration, do away with your gods and serve the Lord only. And also, these people in the second place, they need to understand that they can't have this, I'm going to serve God as this like la-ti-da decision. You can't go into this all cavalier. You know what I'm saying? Like serving the Lord is serious business. How many of you know serving God is not always easy in every situation? It's not always easy to honor and follow through on what you know he's leading you to do in every situation. It's not a simple thing or a light thing to say, I'm going to honor God as God. I will fear him and serve him only. That's not something to be, thrown into lightly. And I think he's reminding them here of it because we need help to actually stay obedient to God. We need God's help to be obedient to God. We need the Holy Spirit leading us, changing us, molding us, making us into the image of Christ. We actually need the Lord himself to help us be obedient to him. That's how we're made. But also, we have in Joshua's words this reminder that God is faithful. There's this reminder that if they go and do what they shouldn't do, if they abandon the God for false gods, they will be destroyed. Why? Because God said he would. And God can't lie. God has said, if you choose me, you choose life. If you don't choose me, not me, you're choosing death. So if they abandon the Lord, God only can be faithful to destroy them. He's reminding them of God's faithfulness. See, unfaithfulness to God cannot persist without consequences. Holding on to idols cannot persist without consequences. And I want to help somebody today, because I know there's many of you Christians watching, some of you in this room, who say, I follow the Lord. I'm a Christian, I identify that way, but yet you keep running into these walls and you keep banging your head and you're praying in all these situations in your life that God would move. But He's just not. And then you pray more and He's not. And you just don't understand why in the world this good God would be like this. Well, could it be that as you're reaching to God with one hand, you're clinging onto this idol with the other? God, I just want your best in my life, but I'm holding on to control. God, I'm so ready for you to show me all the good things that you have stored up for me, but I'm holding on to my God of acceptance. God, I so badly want a spouse, but I can't let go of my God of pleasure. God, would you just move in my family? Would you bring me relationships that are just real, but you're holding on to your own schedule? You're holding on to your finances? You're holding on to being accepted by all these people whose opinion does not ultimately matter. It's become a God to you, fearing people over fearing God. And you can't wholeheartedly follow the Lord who created you when you're holding on to idols. Whether that's a carved image, whether it's literally a little Buddha, or whether that's a preference that you've put above God. God will not split His allegiance with anyone. See, allegiance to God cannot be divided. It can't be like this. There's one God. And our one heart is to follow the Lord. Our thoughts are to follow the Lord. Jesus didn't say, hey, come, let me give my life for you so that you can show up and give me lip service when you feel like it and then just do what you want. Jesus said, lose your life so you can find it. You want real life? Give up everything and follow me. That's what He wants. Jesus asks. God requires all of us. It is not Christian in any sense of the word to hold on to God with one hand and a false God with the other. Not Christian. American Christianity, maybe. Real Christianity, not at all. God asks more of you than what cultural Christianity, nominal nonsense Christianity that amounts to water, asks of you. And one reason I think this is a special group of people is that you actually want God to work on you and help us to be like this. Because here's the deal, guys. None of us can be perfect in following the Lord. We're all going to fall short. We're all going to get knocked down. But we all got to get back up and say, you know what, though? My allegiance is to God only. I am sinful still. I got things He's working out in me. But my loyalty is not divided. God is not content to have you split between two opinions. There's many things for you to spend your time on. There's many things for you to devote yourself to. But there's only one true God. And there's only one way of following Him, and that's with everything. I'm going to ask the worship team to come as we close today, because we got one more song to sing. But I hope you hear not the harshness of my voice or of the word today, but of just the simple truth that there's only really two options here. It's to serve God and Him only, or it's to not. It's it. It impacts every area of your life. And over the next coming weeks, we're really going to roll out these areas of our lives where God has to be Lord. Even in the deep places that maybe our family subscribed to or our culture subscribes to, we're going to unravel some of the ways that we've got caught up in things that are not God and we're actually clinging to false things. Because I believe in doing so is actually going to set you free to experience God's best for you, to walk in what He's called you to do. But today, nothing else matters if you remember nothing but this moment. I want you to know this. You got to choose Jesus or everything else. God, the only true God, or not. Because I can't decide for you. You have to decide. And we are about to sing one more song. And it talks about following Jesus. But as a simple act of faith, this is what I want you to do right now. If you've decided to actually follow Jesus with everything in you, I just want you to stand up as a simple act of obedience in a room full of Christians. Because I submit to you, if you won't even do this in front of other people who love God, come the moment that it actually matters to do it in culture, you're going to bow down. If you're making this decision for the first time, really, and realizing the weight of it, talk to me afterwards. I want to talk to you about the beauty of knowing Jesus and walking with Him. But let this be a moment today that you decided to wake up and stand up. It's the choice of remaining in your chair or getting on your feet. This shows I'm following Jesus. I'm going to stand for Jesus in the middle of my family, possibly, in the middle of a culture, definitely, that is hostile to absolute truth of knowing that God is God. I'm going to stand for Jesus because I can't make this decision for you. I don't know what you're going to decide or what you're going to decide for your family, but as for me in my house, as for me in this church, we will follow the